Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. Moving into my new apartment last year was supposed to be an exciting new chapter in my life. I had just landed my dream job in the city and was thrilled to finally live on my own in a nice building with amenities like a gym and rooftop terrace. The spacious one-bedroom unit was perfect for me, and I eagerly signed the lease and moved in the first week of March. As I pulled into the parking lot with a load of boxes on move-in day, I noticed an older man watching me intently from his ground floor apartment window. I waved politely, and he simply glared and walked away. Well, that was odd, I thought, making a mental note to avoid that grumpy neighbor if I could. According to my lease agreement, I was assigned a parking spot A23, which was conveniently located near the back entrance. As I parked my bright red Mazda 3 in my designated spot for the first time, I felt a sense of satisfaction. No more parking headaches and tickets to worry about. This parking spot was all mine. Over the next few days, as I unpacked and settled in, I ran into the man from the ground floor apartment several times. I eventually learned his name was Tom. He seemed to spend a lot of time roaming the halls and common areas, chatting with other residents and even telling them what to do sometimes. One day I overheard him bragging to someone that he was the unofficial mayor of the building and had been living there for over 15 years. After hearing that, Tom's behavior started to make sense. He clearly relished being in charge and acted like he ran the place. Still, I tried to be friendly and introduce myself, but he merely grunted in response. His vibe was very new kid on the block towards me. The first parking issue arose about 2 weeks after I moved in. As I came home late one Friday night from drinks with co-workers, Tom was lying in wait by my parking spot. "You can't park there," he yelled aggressively as I pulled in. Shaken from the sudden confrontation, I took a deep breath and replied politely that spot A23 was assigned to me per my lease. Tom continued to insist it was his spot and that I must be confused. I showed him my lease agreement stating the assigned spot, but he just grumbled that the landlord had made a mistake. He eventually stomped off, but I had a bad feeling this wasn't over. The next morning, I noticed Tom had left a crude handmade sign in front of A23 saying, "Reserved for real tenants, Tom." I just rolled my eyes and threw the sign away, making a mental note to speak to the landlord about this. Tom was clearly trying to intimidate me, but I refused to give in to his bully tactics. Things escalated when I returned home from work on Monday to find my parking spot empty. My red Mazda was nowhere to be seen. Immediately, I had a sinking feeling Tom was behind this. I rushed downstairs and pounded on his door until he answered, smug grin on his face. "What did you do with my car?" I demanded. Tom feigned ignorance initially, but eventually admitted to having it towed for parking illegally. My blood boiled. This was harassment and retaliation for not giving in to his unreasonable demands. I threatened to call the police to report my car stolen, but Tom merely laughed cruelly. "Go ahead, call the cops. It'll just be your word against mine," he taunted. I retreated back upstairs and tried to calm down. I knew I didn't have definitive proof yet that Tom had my car towed. He was unfortunately right that it would seem like hearsay. After hardly sleeping all night, I quickly got ready for work the next morning. As I walked to where my car was normally parked, I was stopped dead in my tracks. There was an unfamiliar blue sedan parked in my assigned spot A23, and on the windshield was another handmade sign saying parking for rent, $50 per month, call Tom 555-3948. My hands shook with anger as the reality sunk in. That scumbag neighbor had indeed towed my car away and was now outright trying to rent out my parking spot and profit from it. I took photos of the sign and unknown car as evidence and called the police right away to report my car stolen. The officer arrived quickly, and I showed him my lease and photos proving the parking spot was assigned to me. He agreed Tom's actions seemed highly suspicious and probably illegal. He paid Tom a visit to question him while I anxiously waited upstairs. A half hour later, I got a call from the police station. The scrapyard Tom had used confirmed he requested my Mazda 3 be towed there a few days ago, and shortly after, Tom authorized them to junk it and destroy the vehicle entirely. I was speechless. That deranged man had escalated from simply towing my car to having it crushed into a metal cube. The police arrested Tom on the spot for grand theft auto, I provided my testimony and evidence of the assigned parking spot at the eventual trial, and Tom was found guilty and sentenced to 2 years in prison. It was a huge relief to have justice served, but the loss of my beloved car still hurt deeply. I had purchased it just last year, and it was basically my baby. Now I was left searching for a new car while having to budget for monthly rental parking from the landlord. In hindsight, there were some steps I could have taken sooner to protect myself and avoid escalation with Tom. I should have contacted the landlord after the first parking incident to address it officially, rather than letting it slide. Getting my concerns documented would have helped show evidence of Tom's harassment. I also could have tried mediation with a neutral third party to reason with Tom and make him see what he did was wrong. Though given his arrogant nature, he likely would have refused any civil discussion or compromise. At least then I could say I tried all routes before getting authorities involved. Finally, I learned to take threats and retaliation seriously rather than assuming idle scare tactics. Tom clearly felt he could intimidate and push me around without consequence. If I had warned I would get police involved after the first towing, it may have deterred him from escalating to the horrific act of destroying my car. Though the justice felt good, it didn't make up for the months of stress and financial hit I took in this ordeal. I hope Tom spends his 2 years in prison reflecting on his out-of-control ego and anger issues. This unofficial mayor definitely won't have any power or subjects to boss around behind bars. I do feel bad for whoever ends up moving into my unit and crossing paths with him when he's released. At least I'll be long gone by then, parked happily in my new building far across town. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I was working a job that had me operating in one of our offices overseas. We would have business expenses, and those receipts would be in the language of the country we were in, obviously. Those expenses were for things like printer ink, office equipment, cleaning services, marketing costs, all pretty standard stuff. Well, around this time, we got a new VP over our region who worked out of the head office in LA. This VP came up with this brilliant idea to hire a translator to translate all of the receipts to make sure we weren't sneaking in bullcrap. Fair enough. However, the issue that arose was that we had to send our expenses to the translator, who would translate the receipt and then submit them for reimbursement. The problem was this translator was a real Karen type. She would demand better scans of the receipts, oftentimes after we had already thrown them away. She would argue if we really got the best deal on whatever we bought. I remember in one transaction of about $200 of ink cartridges, she asked me why I didn't order online from this common website, to which I said they were out of stock at the time, and we needed the ink, so we bought it from a local store. To which she said I was spending too much money. To which I said it's none of your concern, your job is to translate the receipt. To which she said if I want her to submit my expenses, I need to be nice to her. To which I said she needs to learn her place. She's a translator, not a VP that gets to instruct me what to do. After this encounter, she started being extra anal with my expenses, so one day I came into the office early to call her and try to work things out. She basically told me that I screwed up by pissing her off, and she expected my expense reports to be perfect or she wouldn't submit them unless they were. I told her if she keeps this up, she won't have a job much longer. She laughed and wished me well and hung up. A few months later, we had our annual meeting in LA, and after the meeting, we were at a bar, and I walked up to our VP and started up a conversation. I steered the conversation to expenses, and I asked him how much in monthly expenses he typically reimbursed us for in the country we worked out of. He said about $3,000 to $4,000. I acted surprised and asked, "Is that all?" He goes, "Yeah." To clarify that $3,000 to $4,000 is the typical spend, and he says, "Yeah, it rarely gets above $4,000. So I ask him about how Karen, our translator, is doing. He says she's doing a good job, and I nod my head and I go, "How many fraudulent expenses has she caught?" It's important to note that every employee that was submitting expenses was well paid. They'd be awfully stupid trying to skim some extra dollars via fraudulent expense reports. He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you hired her to ensure all the expenses you were reimbursing us for are legitimate, right? Her job is to translate them for you, correct?" He says it is, and I ask, "So is it safe to presume you've done that to ensure people aren't submitting BS expenses?" He says, "You could say that." I smile and ask, "So how many fraudulent expenses has she caught?" He thinks for a moment and goes, "I don't think she has caught any." So I ask, and how much do we pay her? He says it depends on her workload, but between $2,500 and $3,000 a month. I smile and ask, does it make sense to pay someone $3,000 a month to translate $3,000 in receipts? Well, she ensures we aren't getting fraudulent expenses. And I counter, well, you said she hasn't caught any in the last 9 months, and the expenses are always between $3,000 and $4,000. So as long as the expenses stay in that range, wouldn't it be safe to assume that the expenses are legitimate? And couldn't you bring on a translator on a contract basis if they get out of hand? He sees my point. And imagine the cost savings. We would probably save over $40,000 a year. That's a good chunk of change, isn't it? The VP tries to defend his position. But she does a good job, and I counter, but you could frame this as you've saved us $40,000 a year and created a baseline to judge expenses by. Cutting costs is always good for the bottom line and the end of your bonuses, isn't it? FYI, I knew that a major percentage of a VP's compensation package with the company had to do with the company's margin at the end of the year. The bigger the margin, the bigger the bonus. You can see the twinkle in his eye. We carry on the rest of the night. A few weeks later, we get an email from the VP saying that we are to submit all our expenses directly to the admin for reimbursement, and that we have let go of Karen. FYI, Karen wasn't her real name, obviously. The next one is a petty revenge story. I worked for Subway a while back, and always took on people's shifts because people are lazy, and I like money. One day, I got a call from a girl, I'll call her Gertrude, who I worked with at another store, asking me to cover for her the following day because she sprained her ankle. I was scheduled to work at the same time as her, but promised I'd do my best to find someone to cover for her. Unfortunately, the only person who wasn't working or unavailable was the biggest screw-up in the store. Karen seems fitting. I reached out to Karen, told her Gertrude's predicament, and that she was scheduled for a 6-hour shift which followed mine. I told her I'd stay and cover her shift if she worked the 4-hour shift for Gertrude. I was actually surprised when Karen said yes. I called Gertrude back to tell her the good news, and all was well in the universe. The next morning, 2 hours before Gertrude's shift started, she called me all concerned, asking if I knew anyone else who could cover the shift. I asked her what happened to Karen, and she said Karen texted her saying she can't make it. I was pissed. I texted Karen and asked why she couldn't go, and she said she didn't have a ride. I told Gertrude, who then offered to pick Karen up and drop her back off. I texted Karen to tell her Gertrude was willing to drive her, and all I got back was, nah, I'm good. I was so freaking mad, especially since I was the one who came up with the bright idea to give Karen any semblance of confidence. I apologized profusely, and Gertrude said she'd figure something out. Turns out, she ended up working for 2 hours on a jacked-up ankle before her manager came in to send her home. When I was almost done with my shift, Karen texted asking, "Can you still cover my shift?" Any other day I would have said yes without hesitation, but she made me look bad and made a poor girl go to work on her feet with a busted ankle. So I waited until half an hour before her shift started and responded, "Nah, I'm good." Karen showed up pissed as hell and I didn't say a word to her. I sent Gertrude a screenshot of the conversation and she was super grateful and said I made her day. Does this make me an Avenger? Or a Revenger at least? The next one is a malicious compliance story. Earlier this year, I was doing bar work at a small local pub after college. Anyway, over the weekend, I'd been helping out at the scout group, and due to a combination of shouting too much through the woods and a rather stressful week of family arguments, I slowly and then pretty much completely lost my voice. Sunday evening came and I realized there was no way it would come back for Monday, so I sent my boss a text and email to inform him that I wouldn't be able to work the next night and explained why. Monday came, and I went through college, sending him a reminder email and text before 10 a.m. as is the policy. Around 7 p.m., my shift started at 6:30, I received a call from an angry head chef boss asking about my whereabouts. I had to pass the phone to my sister to speak for me. He then texted me, demanding that I come into work. I decided, you know what, I will, but customers won't be happy. I went in and managed the bar, but it wasn't long before problems started. The first couple of customers just wanted some pints, so there was no need for me to engage in conversation other than motioning for them to pay. Then, A group of already tipsy women wanted a few gins and wines. I couldn't ask them what they wanted or let them know what we had, other than gesturing and scribbling on a notepad. This group included a particularly vocal Karen, and she had a reputation. She began harassing me and then turned her attention to the chef's mom as she walked past carrying a food order. The chef's mom immediately noticed me at the bar, did a double take, and gave me a look of, "You shouldn't be here." She then more or less ordered me to go home. I ended up receiving a full shift's pay for just 10 minutes of actually being there, and was excused from work until my voice returned. A week and a half later, one of the serving staff told me about the aftermath. The chef's mom had fetched the chef from the kitchen and scolded him in the bar area in front of customers. This wasn't the first time he had tried to force staff to come in when they were ill, and she also had him personally deal with Karen. The next one is an entitled people story. Back in 2014, I was forced into ballet by my mother. I hated it, as I wasn't the ballerina type, so I fought with my mom, but in the end, I ended up giving up and went anyway. And that is how I met Devin. He was the most beautiful ballerina I ever saw. He carried himself with grace. His smile was intoxicating, and everybody wanted a piece of Devin. But he only had eyes for me. It didn't take long before we started dating. He was 16 and I was 14. I was in love with Devin. He was supposed to be my knight in shining armor, however. Devin was just a pussy wrapped up in tin foil. About 5 months into our relationship, Devin and I went to a party. Halfway through the party, I lost Devin, so I went looking for him. I found him receiving a blowjob from another girl. I just walked away. I was trying to walk home when the rape muffin rolled up, telling me to get in his car. I didn't want to. I told Devin to go duck himself. I would rather walk home in the goddamn dark than deal with his idiot ass. I don't remember how Devin convinced me to get in his car, but when I did, I just wanted to know why. Why did he cheat on me? That son of an idiot tried to gaslight me. Nothing like that happened. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. I saw nothing. It was not what it seemed. I was making things up. I would not buy that crap because I know what I saw. Then Devin cut off the headlights of his car and just floored it down the dirt road with no streetlights, and just screamed how he was going to kill both of us, and how when someone found our bodies, they just assumed it was an accident. Devin then stopped the car and told me that if I bring up that girl one more time, it won't end well for me. Devin drove me home after that. I should have left him after that, but I was just so afraid of him. It didn't take long for the physical and emotional abuse to start. Dating Devin was like dating my mom. He would scream at me, cry, and stomp his foot when I didn't do what he wanted me to, hit me repeatedly, pressured me into sex, forced me to do angel dust, threatened to kill himself when I refused to talk to him. We dated for a year, and in that year I experienced hell. I didn't tell people what was happening because I was afraid that no one would believe me. On to the title. I had tennis practice, but halfway through my practice I started to feel sick, so I called my stepdad to pick me up and take me home. Before we pulled into the driveway, there was Devin's car. It wasn't all surprising, as sometimes Devin would just be in the house waiting for me. Then, as we walked into the house, we heard them. My mom and Devin weren't quiet. My stepdad pulled out his phone to record, and then we went upstairs and walked on Devin jackhammering my mom. There was a lot of screaming, threats, and crying. My stepdad and I went to the car. Then we drove to a parking lot and just cried while our phones were blowing up. My stepdad then sent the video of my mom and Devin to both of Devin's parents. My ex-in-laws asked for a meeting, they exchanged information, and my stepdad told them he would see them in court. His parents tried to play it off like Devin was a victim. 1. The legal age of consent in my hometown is 16, and he was 17 at the time. 2. No, he ducking wasn't. If you watch the video, Devin was trying to smack the phone out of my stepdad's hand, and when I started crying, asking him how he can do this to me, Devin started telling me to stop crying because I wasn't even that good at sex anyway. My stepdad and I went back to the house. I just went to my room while he went to pack his stuff to leave. My mom came into my room and I was crying because, even though Devin was a piece of crap, he was still my boyfriend. My mom started making fun of me for crying. It's not my fault that your boyfriend wanted me. Boo-hoo, stop crying. Maybe you put on some more makeup, you can keep a man. Then she went on to say how Devin pleased her so well. That he knows how to make her come like a real man, and unlike my stepdad, he knows where the clit was. That Devin would always tell her that she's tighter than I am. All the while, Devin was trying to call me. Y'all. Devin's way of apology was to blame me. I'm sorry you had to see that. But if you spend more time with me, I wouldn't have been seeking other women. Your mom was there for me and she cared for me. You abandoned me when I need you the most. Blah blah blah, victim blaming, like idiot. I gave you my heart and soul. I put my needs on the back burner for yours. What the duck do you want from me? Then Devin switched tactics, trying to convince me that I misunderstood the situation, like, mother ducker. I walked on you ducking my mom, you flip-floppy bastard. So fast forward to the time I went to school, I didn't talk to my mom or Devin at that time. So Devin's sister spread the news to the school that Devin had sex with my mom. Now, I was afraid to tell people that Devin was abusing me because I knew no one would believe me, because Devin had this good boy reputation. Only a few people have seen how awful Devin truly was. However, Devin let his mask slip and hit me in front of the whole student body. The funny part about Devin hitting me is the fact that no one believed he was having sex with my mom. No one believed that until he hit me and started screaming that I ruined his reputation. He just had to keep his ducking mouth shut. We were separated, and I had to explain to the principal and our guidance counselor that that wasn't the first time Devin had hit me. That boy did a lot worse things to me than just hit me. Do you want to hear some mass-up crap? Before me, Devin was in a relationship with a girl and he did the same thing he did to me to her. She told people and no one believed her because, like I said above, Devin was a good boy in everybody's eyes. They isolated that girl to the point where she had to move away. No one believed her until Devin slapped me, and it didn't help that Devin threw a tantrum. He got suspended because he broke things in his tantrum. After that, a lot of people came forward and spoke about how Devin was secretly a piece of crap. Devin's parents gave my stepdad some money to keep it out of court and then moved away because of shame, and my stepdad and my mom got divorced because Devin wasn't the only person my mom was cheating with. By the way, my mom never stopped seeing Devin. That idiot took him on elaborate trips. They went to Hawaii, Disneyland, and goddamn Texas. Devin and my mom were a match made in hell, but karma prevails. Devin suffered a leg injury and he can't do ballet anymore, and he got fat. My mom left him, his parents abandoned him, and the last time I checked, he works at an auto store and lives with his sister. And to top all that, my mom gave him gonorrhea. How is your leg? I know you're reading this, you piece of crap. It's a shame, isn't it? You tried your best to live a good life, but in the end you're in debt, fat as hell, and worth nothing. But me? I'm in love. Happily married to a dude who treats me like a queen and has 3 babies. Eat the dirtiest part of my ass, Devin. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.